This is a weekly show hosted by Straw Dog Theater Company, where we bring theater artists from around the globe into a conversation about live theater in a digital world with a spirit of gratitude and innovation. I'm Aly Amidei. I'm a Straw Dog Ensemble member and board member. I'm also a professor of theater of costume design at UW-Madison. I'm a costume designer, a playwright, what else do I do? Lots of things. And I study immersive theater, accessibility for people with disabilities in theater. And I do new works and re-envision classics is what I do. So if you are watching this on YouTube, you can head over to strawdog.org/thankyou5 to join the chat and ask questions. And more importantly, to vote on questions so that we know which questions you want us to ask our panelists. Speaking of our panelists, let's meet tonight's guests. So we're going to talk to Sky first.
We are going to talk to me first. Okay, that's great. Well, my name is Sky. I'm here in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle. But I originally started my life in Kansas and then joined a theater troupe out of Los Angeles. That was an international company that took me to 34 different countries and almost all of the states. And I got to perform live because we did a lot of what we called school programs and dealing with theater to encourage, empower, and challenge in communication using drama. So that was 15 years of my life. And then I moved into the TV and video world in Los Angeles. That then kept going up the West Coast and now here in Seattle, mostly in the video production of things, but it's still telling stories just in a two-dimensional way.
Great. Okay, we're going to talk to Matt now. Matthew, sorry.
That's fine. I answered to both. Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Buffalo. I'm coming to you from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm originally from Arkansas and got my schooling there and then moved to New York City. And I moved down here from New York about 7 years ago. My background is musical theater and did that for many years and started getting the question or the statement, you're a musical theater performer, you're not an actor. And after hearing that for so many times, I was like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I went and got my MFA in acting from Indiana University and fell in love with Laban movement analysis and got my certification in that about 10 years ago now. I currently teach at New World School of the Arts in Miami, Florida. I teach movement, musical theater workshop, all kinds of stuff. And my thing right now is more devising movement is kind of my thing that's exciting me and really motivating me right now. And I'm excited to talk with everyone tonight.
Right. Tamra.
Hi, I'm Tamra. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California, but I'm pretty bi-coastal because I produce theater here in Los Angeles and then also Off-Broadway in New York. My background, I've been doing theater for 35 years. I can't believe I can say that.
The fives.
But I started as a prop designer, prop manager, and then became an equity stage manager and kind of worked my way up to doing all the things as all of us do, all the things all the time. So primarily now I'm a producer and I'm a casting director. So I do theater, and then I also have kind of paralleled that with a career in television and film. So I kind of am the development end of things right now. I'm in an animated series on Netflix in post-production. Awesome. So I do all the things, and my passion right now actually is this digital space and this playing with theater digitally. During the pandemic, we shot our long-running Off-Broadway show that had run for 3 years, Frankenstein, for an educational audience. It's currently on, just literally premiered last weekend on streamingmusicals.com. So that is our first real foray into what is not theater and what is not television and film. And I'm kind of interested in this overlap a little bit. So
awesome. Bex.
Hi, my name is Bex. I use they, them, and he, him pronouns interchangeably. I am just getting started. I graduated from Purdue, so we've got the rivalry going a month ago. So I'm a baby. But I double majored in acting and creative writing because I do playwriting, poetry, songwriting. Stage combat and Shakespeare are definitely two of my biggest focuses at the moment. I just finished up level 2 actor combatant training with Building Arts International out in Denver earlier in May. Hoping to start working on teacher training next year and looking at grad schools, whether that's U of Washington or Western or somewhere else in the States, or getting a Fulbright and going to Lambda, crossing fingers, because I do eventually want to become an acting coach for trans actors, because that's a niche that I don't see filled, at least in the Midwest. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's wonderful to have you all. Hold on, I lost my script. So now that we've all met, we're going to get started with our first question, which is probably the biggest one. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this. And that is, what is theater? And the first person to answer this will be Bex.
Yeah, so since I'm in the middle of writing essays for the Fulbright and all of the grad school applications, I actually ended up having to answer this question already. And so I'm going to pull right from that essay, which is, I said that theater for me is living in real time and community with a group of strangers and agreeing collectively to believe in a fictional story just long enough to go on a life-changing journey together.
That's super cool.
Nice. Sky.
Oh, that's so unfair.
Like,
She just, how do you follow that?
no way.
She had a script and everything, and I'm here. We're riffing and improving. Yes, and so I will take that ball and run. My pondering on this question is the theater of the mind, and that story has been around since humans, and consequently we've been telling each other, how the bear came into the camp, and I'm running with that, sitting around the campfire motif, and technology has actually gotten in the way of that. And so that COVID kind of flattened the world and put us all on the same playing field. And we are now learning how to understand our own story. And now consequently, how do we communicate that through these new digital issues? I have participated. I went to the theater. I saw the Guardians of the Galaxy. It was, my mother-in-law's quote was, "I've seen all the fireworks I need to see for the rest of the year." But as far as story, she says, I didn't think people could, oh, sorry, spoiler alert, could die that many times in a single movie. Sorry. Okay. If you, I tried to give you a warning, but the how do you tell a story and what are the platforms? But Bex, I'm going to need you to requote that and put that up on a banner for me, because that's going to go on my wall.
Great. Tamra.
Well, I love Beck's answer, so I don't really know what to say. For me, I actually feel like the question has become so new and different in this new world. And so what I used to say is that it's having a shared experience in a live space. And I don't know what live space means anymore. And I don't know what shared experience means anymore. So I actually don't have, I'm still grappling with what that looks like. And even, having kind of done this, I think that there's this new space, this space in between what was a live experience and what was, what is television and film, which is a very different experience. Even though film can have a shared experience, it's definitely not theater, because one of the main differences for me about theater than in television and film is really that the audience gets to be their own director. No offense to my directing friends out there. I know you work very hard, but the truth is, like, we can all go and see the same show and have a same shared experience, but absolutely see different things. My one of my best friends is a music director on Broadway. We go and see shows together, and we come out and I've seen all of the lighting and the tech and all of these other things, and he's like, "What show did you watch?" Like, we literally watched the same show but saw what we wanted to do. So I think that agency is a little bit different in theater, in a theater space than in a digital space. So I don't have a fully formed answer, I don't think, but I'm continuing to discover it. I used to say, theater is my therapy. Like, if I was going to go and just lose myself for a couple of hours. But it is interesting to watch audiences having come out of COVID, because audiences are so drastically different. And like, they can't sit through anything. Like, they're reaching for their digital devices, like, sneaking them under the table. And so that's been a real interesting experience to see that we've changed as a audience and as a people. So it's hard to know exactly what that means for us.
Mhm.
And I'm interested in discovering it and seeing what's new and what's old.
Yeah. Matt.
Yeah, I ditto everything that's been said. I'm kind of going to be what's left to say. But it's a big question, right? I mean, it's what is the answer? I don't think there is an answer. I think it's an individual experience. For me, um, along with what everyone was saying, it's a home, it's a laboratory, it's a place where the reason I do theater is to collaborate and to share those experiences and to learn something new each time I walk into that performance, to that rehearsal room, whatever it is. Even in casting, right? Just I learned something new about myself, about the human condition, about a new way of thinking. So I think what's so wonderful about theater is that it is a laboratory. It's a constant living organism that's changing, evolving, changing me, and hopefully changing those that have those different experiences, like Tamra said, that walk away seeing the same show but are experiencing something different, getting a little nugget of something that someone else didn't. I think that's so cool. That's kind of my big answer.
Yeah, I mean, the one I feel like many of you going last is not fun. Because I feel like you've all said things better than I would say it. But one of the things I always say is it always feels it's something visceral for me. Like I feel it when I watch it, I feel it in my body in a way I don't when I, sometimes maybe I get a little tingly when I watch a film or a television show, but not the same way that I do when I'm experiencing theater. Although what I like about Bex's response, which unfairly we can all see in the panel because they put it in the chat for us, but talking about this theater as living in real, I'm going to quote it again, theater as living in real time. Oh, it's in the chat now, great. And community with a group of strangers, is that this allows for the other forms of theater that I think many of us are interested in, like maybe combining theater with virtual reality, which I'm interested in, or AR, and I was just thinking about this. I don't want to take us on a huge tangent, but I was reading about the Apple just released its shockingly expensive headset like images yesterday, and I'm where it's a combined, I can't think, it's called Apple Vision, where it'll let you look through and see, like, have a AR augmented reality kind of things where you can layer on stuff. And I'm thinking, well, it would be great. I can see all these amazing applications for theater, but no one will be able to afford this for many, many years from now. But I can't wait to think of how we can make those
right.
Like, I'm wondering if that'll be the trick to get the people who are fidgety in their seats to sit through an experience or not. Or will it get in the way? Will we even need it? So it's interesting to me. But this response that you gave, Bex, kind of opens the door for other lets you have other experiences that are not just the old school sit in a theater, which I value highly and love because of the because it's about the human experience and in art making and making a mess and accidents and things like that. I love all that about making theater, but I also am interested in these other, these new sciencey technology frontiers and the way we can incorporate that into our art making. Yeah, I don't know. I want all the tools at my disposal to make art, right?
Well, and again, why do we do theater? And again, I think we've heard a varietal experience here, and one of the reasons is I found that I'm a herd critter. I need to be with other humans of like mind, and as you said, creating something is and accomplishing something together, and that the term community is in Beck's statement. And I, again, like a good Los Angeles, I said, content is king. And I was on this Zoom call 2 years ago, and the response came back, no. Community is king. Content is the honey that pulls them together.
Mm.
And that did the 180. Yeah, that flipped the script in the 180 of the system that often becomes, how do we make money at this? And that is often the sacrifice of art. And of course, in the improv situation of yes, and how can it be both? How is it a thing that we can sustain ourselves with? Now, theater is in the traditional sense, a place that we gather, but
Right.
we are now gathering here. And this is why I'm challenged by the theater of the mind. And
Mhm.
consequently, to your point of the Apple experience is similar to, well, even less than 6 months ago when Midjourney and ChatGPT and of course, coming from media, I worked in the news industry there in Los Angeles, Univision, and consequently, I learned 2 Spanish words working for a Spanish television. It was Budweiser, but that's about it. And consequently, I recognize the whole comment of if it bleeds, it leads.
Mhm.
And that's because we go back from your, yellow journalism of, as you pointed out, people's attention spans are marketed to
Mhm.
that high emotional impact because they recognize they've got less than 3 seconds to sell you something because that's their job. Right. And so this is where I think that I went back to story because my $100,000 piece of editing software got end of lifed by the manufacturer. Now it was still perfectly good, but nobody wanted to use it because, well, they don't support that anymore. And it's like it's like if it were an axe or a screwdriver, it would not have mattered. So that's why I took my 20 years of editorial and then the years before that in live theater is it's not about the tools, it's about the story first. So that's the future for me, is looking back at our past as a species. And I think we need each other, I think, as Zoom has proved, and now StreamYard here and then YouTube. And to your point, we want to be connected and we think there's something else out there that's going to give us that dopamine hit. So how do we now tell stories? And that's where Beck's going to come in because her thesis is all about it, and she's going to just shut us down.
What's so
And I'll,
interesting about
We hope anyway.
what's so interesting about what you all said, it reminded me of someone mentioned that it's home, right? When we first went into the pandemic, I shut down 5 shows in 3 states in 12 minutes. So and they were all range of things, and we immediately went to an online space. We did weekly chats with actor chats and director chats and writer chats, and it evolved into a writing community online. As you did, right? Like in the entire theater, the TV community that I was in, like animation, we're all sent home, which we could never do before because they wouldn't let us leave the studio. All of the live action people were like, we'll never work again. And, the theater people needed each other so much that they started meeting every day and Friday afternoons and meeting. But in that initial thing, a lot of the kids that I had in my shows were like, this was so devastating as it was to all of us, but they were like, how, is theater ever going to come back? And my answer to them is still the same answer, which is it will come back because theater is a space where we all fell into it and found a place of acceptance. And they accepted us at our quirkiest, where we didn't fit in other places, and we fit here in this space. And so that's always going to be a need for people, and that's always going to draw, certainly the theater makers together, because we all found theater in a really weird way. When we went around the room, we're like, how did you find theater? How did you get into this weird thing? And it's because we were kind of on the outside of things, and we stumbled into this world that just said, this is who you are. You don't have to be anything else, and come and play with us. And we did. And so, I think that's one of the things that will always kind of unite us and keep us grounded. And it's really interesting for me because I toggle both worlds. I love the business of television. I also love the story of television. I spent 25 years mostly in writing and working with writers. So I have a real passion for story, and I've done all the genres: soap operas, animation, comedy, drama, all of them. And I really love good storytelling, but I also love the business of how you craft a story for television. I can't tell you, I am probably never going to have a Tony because I literally do not love the business of theater. I just don't care. I don't care who's in the audience. I really think that it's best when it's just, we're going to do the same best performance anyways. So I love, I still love writers. I do a lot of developmental theater. I do a lot of musicals. That's kind of my favorite. But I think that's one of the things that will always unite us. And I don't care as much about the business part of it like I do. I mean, really, there's a big separation for me. But I think story unites any of it. I think you're absolutely right, Sky. It's like, that's where it starts and ends.
As it turns out, I know I'm going to jump on. Is that okay, Bex?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I see. This is the other courtesy issue that we're learning how to not be completely rude idiots. I'm just sort of a rude idiot. The early days was almost a 12-step self-help group, and Zoom allowed me to bring my theater people together, and we created a show weekly as a discipline. It was called Elephant in the Room. It's on YouTube. And it was an improv situation where we anthropomorphized 6 different humans into an animal that were now in a group session discussing their issues together.
That's so cool.
And consequently, we could talk about anything. This was early days of all the things that were flying everywhere, and they didn't smell good. So I think we actually did save somebody's life. That sounds hyperbolic, or not the right word. What's the word? Over the
you're
top.
Right.
There we go. It sounds way over the top, but there was a gentleman that had not been out of his house in 2 years. Good friend of mine. I reached out to him. I said, brother, we're got to do this thing. I don't know how to, and we got him on his little Mac, and we got a thing, and we got his internet working, and that pulled him out of that spiral from having lost his wife. And so to let him have an outlet to be his creative self, to bring the community together that had been in this theater troupe that I had been with 20 years ago. It was like I said, it was a new opportunity. And that's why as a video editor, Tamra, this is where you and I kind of, you might be my new best friend, but we'll see how that goes. But I'm sitting in a dark room living other people's lives on a screen. So when Zoom came along, I was like, come on in. It's been fine for 20 years. This is great. But I'm an introvert extrovert mix, and I allowed myself to be a creative. And that was the opportunity that I wanted to share with others. And now the story part of this, again, where do we, as you say, the live, having 14,000 live performances, I get the vibe, the energy you get from a live audience. You cannot replace that with this 2-dimensional media.
Right.
I've tried. But and to your point, Aly, the headset, oh yeah, it's the next automobile, and the people that do shoe horses are still scared again, but it's going to be yet another way we connect. And I'm looking forward to hear Matthew, especially with the movement of something that's hard to do in a little 2-inch box.
Impressive.
Yeah, one of the things. Oh, I'm sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
No, go. I was just trying to unmute. Go talk. Go for it.
I was going to say one of the things that was interesting, thinking about theater, what is theater again, was also, I mean, it's this collection you were talking about, this land of misfit toys, basically, that we all are, right? But the thing is that what the pandemic did is kind of, I think, because we were all some people were forced to find other ways to employ themselves during that time. And then the rest of the world kind of realized, oh, these are like ridiculously skilled people. Like we are forced to be good at many, many things. And we all then many of us theater people had to learn how to talk about our skills and market them to non-theater people, and realized, oh, we're good at all these things that people need in business. And you know, like we can, like if you've been a stage manager at some point ever, you basically could do about all of the jobs in the world, I think, you know, including president, you know. So I mean, I think like you have all of these skills of you know, managing people, managing schedules, all these, I mean, just so many things. And that we have been we were forced to kind of learn how to market ourselves and explain what we do to other people in a way that, like, I think I don't know, I feel like I have a little bit more appreciation for our value in this in a post-pandemic world than I did before. Like I thought, I'm like, I just do such a niche thing, but I'm like, no, I could actually translate these skills if I ever wanted to like peace out and do something else. I'm not going to. I mean,
it's just convincing other people of that, because
yeah,
they're talking about it. They do exactly what you said, which is no one could actually do all of those things. And it's like, I don't know how to think any other way. I literally don't know how to think any other way than coming up as a stage manager and doing multiple things. And they look at my resume, and I had a very difficult time finding work after my last show, because people would look at me and go, well, but you've done this. And I'm like, trust me, I can do that.
yeah.
And it's the language. It's the language. If in under 6 months, the entire planet understood what gallery view meant, right?
Yeah.
What other point in history had the entire human species come to understand a single phrase other than landing on the moon? That might be the closest that I can connect with that. So consequently, what I determined, Tamara, was I had to translate into the corporate language. I had these skills that had huge value in Los Angeles.
Right.
But my product in Los Angeles, it took me 5 years to figure this out. My product was story.
Right.
Up here in Seattle, the product is coffee beans, airplanes, software, football. So that's where I had to learn to speak the language of the tribe that I was herding into. And that helped a little bit. But Matthew's dying to speak, and I keep overrunning it. I'm so sorry, Matthew. I'm so sorry.
I need to make a list because I'm hearing some wonderful things that I want to touch upon, but I know I'm not going to remember everything.
Oh, for a piece of paper.
But like I'm right there with you. Like terminology, how do I put into words what I do? We do.
Right.
It's so difficult. I know coming out of the certification program for movement analysis, I was like, this can help so many people. But how do I put into words that they will understand, right? Changing the vocabulary. It's all about changing the vocabulary and putting into their vocabulary, and then showing the need. So that was a struggle, but I feel like I'm getting better with it. But movement with, and, in the digital world, there are some people doing some wonderful things, with technology and putting things on people's bodies and amazing ways to, as you see movies now, that's coming. It's been 10 years ago when I was studying, I was just hearing about all these things. I was like, what? That's no way. That's crazy stuff. But now we see it in movies, and we see all this actual fluid movement, right? And animation and all kinds of things. I mean, Tamara, you know more about all that than I do, but my mind, I can't really wrap it around that. More for me is like, I think what helped me with what the pandemic helped in my work is that it broke me out of the mold of thinking traditionally, if that's the only word I can use is traditionally, of this is what movement looks like. This is what dance looks like. This is what a theater performance looks like. And of course we saw, some technology here and there. But now through Zoom, through like thinking outside the box and putting together a musical on Zoom that I had to do, I was like, how do I do this? I had to figure it out. and now I'm like, well, why don't I use this when I go back? So it's really starting to open my mind to not say no, but say like we do in improv, right? Yes, and so yes, we can do it. How can we do it? How can we elaborate this? How can we not just look at the body, but amplify the body even more and spotlight the body even more through these different tools we have? So I don't know if I answered anything or all of it, but I was just talking. But yeah, I'm loving listening to everyone, and I'm going to look up the Apple headset because I haven't heard about that yet. I've not been on them.
It's very sexy.
It's super interesting too, because some of the things that we've used in theater for a bit, like Isadora, which is how we do all our projections, is usable in Zoom. And so all these people are like, yeah, we can do these things with Isadora. I'm like, we've been doing those things for a couple years now. Like, we've been mapping big things on walls for a long time. So that's kind of an interesting, kind of mix of things as well.
My anxiety. Two questions. Oh,
Beck.
Bex's turn. She had her finger up. Go
I
for
was
Beck.
about to be like, nope, Beck's turn.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, especially since like my niche is kind of like also in like stage combat, which is also like a very physical movement based kind of thing. I got the privilege of getting to TA both an acting 1 class and a combat class my last semester, and seeing people, because like my generation and younger have grown up with this just in our hands all the time, and seeing when like some of my peers and some of the people who are a couple years younger than me would finally like trust to not have this in their hands and to like actually put it down, to not think about it, and come back to like that physical one-on-one, making eye contact with another person, breathing together, moving together. I got to see, and I really, really, really honed in with some of the non-binary and trans actors that I got to work with, because I have that translation ability that some of my cisgender, peers don't have. And I was able to see them go from hiding behind their phones to, oh, I can do this. And like getting to see them grow and blossom, even in, just like, a 6-week class, was just amazing.
Awesome. This is all great. I was going to, we have a new question I'm going to ask you. So this is the theater seems to be a low latency common happening where each viewer has the permission to have a different experience. How do we bring that to the screen? I don't know exactly what that means. I'm trying to think about that. Well, I guess let me start trying to unpack this. Thinking about like with theater as an audience member, I mean, it depends on what kind of theater you're doing, because if you're in the kind of traditional theater where you're sitting in the audience, you have the opportunity as an audience member to choose where you're going to put your attention on the stage. Whereas other like more like immersive theater experiences, you as an audience member have far more agency in the way you're interacting with the entertainment experience, right? So that is something I think that like film will never be able, screen work will never be able to give you, is that kind of agency as a audience participant, right? To choose your own path, help when you're an audience member in immersive theater, and often even sometimes in the more traditional performance space, you are directly giving feedback to the performers and helping shape the story sometimes, depending on how interactive the performance is. But then if it's an immersive theater piece, you are definitely shaping your own experience as well as sometimes the story too, in a way that like, I mean, and unless we're going back to that kind of choose your own adventure film experience where you press a button that they tried out, like you can't do that they haven't quite figured that out yet. I don't think that it works the same way. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's one of the things I see as a big difference between live theater and theater experiences. And screen experiences. Tamra is next.
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit a yes and approach. One of the things that have been really fascinating to me is that at the core of any medium is story, right? We start there. We're telling some kind of story. That is absolutely true. What is fascinating about the story about the struggle right now is actually not for theater and not for new media. It's for standard media, because people are less interested in having a one-sided conversation. So I would posit that traditional television and traditional film are really struggling. They're struggling to find an audience. That's why writers are not able to get a contract, because there's no need for them to. But if you look at some of the newer medium that is really like taking off, TikTok is a storytelling medium, and it's got two components to it that are the exact same components that theater has. It has storytelling and community. And I think coming out of the pandemic, one of the things for me in terms of like, this was a huge blessing for me to be able to be connected to people that I don't know all over the world. I produced in Los Angeles a writer from Australia that I would not have known if it wasn't for the pandemic. I wouldn't have met any of you if it wasn't for the pandemic, because even doing theater, we were with community, but we were with our tiny community. Even for me in the New York theater scene, I would go to the same theater group that I now, produce content for. I would go to, there's a theater producing group based out of New York that was kind of this elusive thing. You'd go in, you'd be hanging out with other Broadway producers, off-Broadway producers. And, if you were doing a show, then you weren't able to go. And that team, starting like the third week of the pandemic, got together, and now it's a global community. And so there's a globalness to this that has made us connected in ways that we haven't ever had the opportunity before. But it's those two things that really have made theater work: storytelling and community. And even the newer media that is really holding true, it's all based on community. It's, you may not like a particular thing on there, but TikTok is regular people telling their story and a bunch of people interacting with that story. So I think that in a way, theater has that essence has always been there for us, but now it's really moving into more mainstream media, and the media that's struggling really is traditional television and film.
Sky.
It's the participant versus the observer.
Mm-hmm.
And at what buy-in do you allow your audience to participate, or do they want to be just an observer? And as we just described, the last 2.5 years have forced everyone to be not just the talent, but also the camera operator and the audio engineer and the makeup artist and the costumer, and all of these traditional individuals, crew members, have been forced upon, again, the human species. And everybody said, it's okay, because we need to be connected somehow. Now, to the again, Tamra, to your question, to your point about, do we need writers? Oh, hell yes.
Oh yeah. I'm not
Yeah.
we don't need them.
No, I don't. I didn't mean to say that.
These are
you were not
my people. I'm not gonna...
They are, and here's why. My best quote on the big fear of Chat GPT or GPT or whatever, and I use it. I just can't remember. Dyslexia. It's a bitch. Anyway, the comment was, this is going to sound a little disrespectful, but hopefully meant as a joke. We'll see if I get by with it. The quote was, our jobs are secure because the AI requires the individual to let it know what it wants. What executive have you worked with that can do that?
Right.
And as an executive, I take that personally. And at the same time,
on both sides. So
story's hard. And I just did a stand-up learning how to tell jokes just so I could tell stories in the shortest amount of time possible.
Yeah.
Holy moly, writing's hard.
It's hard. It's super hard.
So I don't know if that had anything to do with the question of theater latency, but I think I like the comment that the world now and the generation the forcing of us to find new means of connecting has forced us to be a part of the conversation that we didn't have to be before. Maybe.
And that's intergenerational, like this call. You know, that's the other part of it. Everybody gets a seat. Bex, you have a seat. Come on.
I got more salt and pepper. I get a seat.
So, new question. What has been the most influential piece of tech that you have used in the theater? And Bex is going to start.
Okay. Very specific to my experience, but costumes for me and props. Props, obviously, because swords. There's a lot of care that goes into weapons and such, making sure that they're safe, blah, blah, blah. And swords are fun, and I like them. But costumes are something that we ran into with, I did Shakespeare in Love at Purdue, and there were 7 of us who were trans or non-binary or both. And some of us got roles that, lined up with our gender. Some of us didn't. Some of us were playing 7 characters because the ensemble roles, you just kind of get what you get. And that's something that Purdue is trying to wrestle with as we need to think about this, is how costumes, how can you still stay true to the story, because we're all here to serve that first, but do it in a way that keeps the trans and non-binary actors and that you're working with safe. Is it a conversation about, hey, these are the roles that we're having to play because of the logistics of who's entering and exit anywhere. Okay, this means that you're going to be wearing a dress in this scene. How can we help support you so that you still know you're safe, even though you may be playing a character that may trigger some dysphoria? And we lucked out that we had a really supportive costume team who did the best they could with, you can't alter rented costumes a whole heck of a lot. But we came through and supported each other, and it's definitely something that it was one of the biggest things that sort of spurred I want to delve more into queer performance in theater, because like there is the argument of like, well, you're an actor, it's just pretend, you can play anything, and like, yeah, I'd love to get to that point, but right now I cannot play a she/her role because it's triggering, it's still blurring the line between, okay, is this person referring to me as a character or misgendering me? And it's a tricky balance, and we found that like costumes is something that that's where we have to wrestle with it most.
Yeah, as a costumer, I mean, I badger my students with with this stuff about like, really having to take into consider, because this is not, if I go back to my training, and I'm probably the training of like most of us besides you, Bex, have was pretty old school in so many ways, and we were this is how it's always been done. If I had like a nickel, or if I took a shot every time someone said that, I would be very intoxicated by the end of almost every meeting I'm ever in. Right. So, but like the shifting that whole conversation about actor identity and the way that it intersects with character identity, and then the intentions of the playwright, the intentions of the director, the intentions of the story, and then the impact on the audience is all something we have to consider. And in a way that with costumes, it's the nuances are pretty tricky to handle. And if you're not prepared as a costume designer to deal with that, it can be you could cause harm, right, to the actors and to audience members potentially too. So it's something that hopefully there's a growing awareness, and I applaud you for this. I think this is a great path, this idea of like coming up with trans acting methods, basically. Like that's been a couple of textbooks in recent years have focused on different acting methods. Like there's a Black acting methods book. There's a new one that's like a Latinx acting methods book that's taking into consideration the specific challenges of a racial or ethnic identity when taking on different roles. And so this idea of a gender identity, specifically a trans identity when considering your acting, the and like the added complications of that, I think is really going to be a great change. I think it's really needed. And I think it's really cool. And I bet there's a lot, you better get on it because other people are going to be like, that's an amazing idea. I could have a book out next week and everyone will get it. So write it fast. And very quickly. Anyways, that's amazing. Thank you for that response. Then Sky, what's the most influential piece of tech you've used?
Well, coming from live theater, and it was scripted for, like I said, 15 years, traveling. We did not carry a lot of sets, so we used the audience's imagination out of necessity, but it also embedded the imagery in their living room, which is where we set it up. And consequently, yeah, we cheated, but we were just 4 people in a van. And so we could pull from a repertoire of about 300 plays in the moment. So it was all scripted plays, but we could, like I said, change depending on the audience. Now, moving into Los Angeles, I recognized you are now performing not to the back of this theater so they can hear you, but to the eyeball right there. This is that little eyeball. And that was my biggest challenge in the House of Worship experience during COVID, was to get the people to stop speaking as they had learned to teach to, everybody that, they'd gone through that training, but no, they needed to talk to, and I had them choose a saint that they recognized. And I said, that is the conversation you're having with that human, that their single eyeball right there. And that helped flip the script again for them. So technology, I'll finish off with, we got to do, as a part of this experiment called Office Hours, a thing with a theater in Belfast. And we got to do live productions with that theater early days. So we, again, as a community, a survivor, trying to help a friend that we didn't know before the event ever, before we were forced to. And so we got to learn a lot about multi-cameras. And again, coming from news, TV, that was a matter of course at a very high cost level. Now everybody's doing it. So where's the professional? Where's the civilian? That's where I'm holding on to story. That's the unifier.
Right.
Tamra.
So my answer, which is truly my answer, because I couldn't think of anything else, but it's true to my heart, is such a stage manager's answer, but it has been my answer forever, which is my clear comms, which I did, but specifically clear comm.
Tell people what clear comms are. I think most people are theater people on this.
Are headsets with a belt pack, which are, I'm from the old school days where you had to be wired, but now they're wireless. But I love them. And I have very varying size theaters. So, out here in Los Angeles, I've got a 38 seat space that is, a developmental space. So I don't need clear comms in that. But when I stage manage, the only thing I stage manage now is a yearly ice skating show. And I asked for years and years. I'm like, I have to have them, but man, they make me so calm and happy. Like there's other tech that everyone else cares about more, but those clear comms, man, still my favorite.
I was going to answer something and now I can't remember what I was going to say. Well, my most influential, but one of the things I sometimes the things that are so effective for storytelling are like the most lo-fi solutions ever. I was doing She Kills Monsters, where I was the director. I was voluntold to be the director, basically. I've never directed before, but the people who were running this university that I was at saw that I was an artistic director at one point, and they thought that meant I could direct. And I'm like, those totally different jobs. They just have the word director. But I'm like, whatever. If I was ever going to direct something, that was going to be the play that I directed, having lived that life as a dork in the 90s. So I thought I could do it. Anyway, what I did in that show that was great, two things I think worked out well, is that for the weapons in that show, with, I don't know if you know that show, Bex, it's like a huge swordy show. I use these, like, instead of using like metal swordies, I use these rubber like training swords that I could find on YouTube, which worked to keep all the actors safe, so no one could get, and then I didn't have to have anyone on like sword rubbing detail. I'm sure there's a name for that. The person that has to like buff out.
Yeah, maintenance, no, deburring.
Yes, I just call it the sword rubber because that sounds like a dirty job, I guess. But then because a good chunk of that cast were women, and some of them were smaller women, it let it let everybody be a confident fighter and not have to worry about the weight of the objects too. Not that women can't hold a giant sword, they can, but it was an equalizer in terms of ability to that. And I thought it was fun. And plus I had the other thing I did that I thought was fun as a way to tell story, and that was low tech, was using shadow puppets with an overhead projector to tell a story scene where like the students made little puppets and then they moved them around on the shadow. It was like very like junior high theater class project. And I really, it was like the shadow puppets can, like, they're amazing. Like that puppetry, like really simple storytelling, visual storytelling, and really worked, I think, well for the show. And it was that kind of thing. Like, it can just be so, sometimes the best solution is not the most expensive solution. It is what you have, and then it let the actors be more creative. I think in a moment where I could have, had I had a lot of money or a lot of resources, like we could have done some amazing like video projections and, like all this stuff, but it was just way better just to have stick puppets and a shadow projector. So then Matt.
Yeah. So, tech for me, I'm not a tech person, but I love it when I see it. But so my big thing though with tech is kind of what you're saying, or other people are saying as well. Simple sounds. A sound effect can go so far. I love ambient sounds. I love, in productions, I love, you know, it takes a lot of work, but in timing, but I love sounds. I also love, and I haven't used it as much, but I'm going to start using it more. And I may have to be careful with this because people have allergies and people have things like that, but smell as well. And I think maybe I'm missing from, being in a theater and smelling theater, but smells, I think, can really add to a moment if it's safe and, you've told everyone and all that kind of stuff beforehand. And this is not tech at all, but I think coming out of COVID, what I see myself doing more and more is less with set and stage. I like the simple, basic. If I can have a blank stage or blank space, not even a stage, but a space, I love that more because I see the person. I see the three-dimensional person and not just this, one-dimensional thing in front of me. I think I've been longing for that. So I want the actor to do and create the work and not have all the bells and whistles. Just a scent and a smell and an empty stage. There we go.
I love that
story.
Yeah.
Story.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think about I was like, oh, I love all this technology stuff, but I'm like, oh no, I also like what you just said too. And sometimes I think there's a place for both things. It's sometimes even in the same show, but man, I
love it. I mean, I admire people that can think that way. I can to a certain degree, but I leave it to the other people to.
Well, I will say one thing that was new for me, because now we're exploring the idea of like filming and streaming and doing all this stuff. And so for the very first time ever that I would have ever thought I would have done this in my life, my last little developmental show, I was in the back of the theater live switching between multiple cameras on my little A10 mini. And I was like, who knew that this was a theater thing? But I will tell you, the stage manager in me, I was like, I love this a lot. I love this a lot. So there was things about it that what I came to was really interesting. What my tech guy and I came to was that what we wanted, because we knew the show so well, I wanted to switch camera for theater, not like film and TV, like we do hard cuts. I wanted actually to put it on a wheel and do it like old school lighting. And I was wanting like a T-bar to fade from camera to camera. And we found that when we started playing around with it, that there was a way to bring this technology in, but it wasn't what we had all been taught in terms of what makes good camera switching. Because when I was able to kind of sneak the camera from one angle to the other as an actor was walking in the way that you would with a light, then it was a much more organic experience for me as a viewer. And that is not what you're going to learn in terms of camera work. But it was very much felt a lot like, the old days when I would run the 2-scene preset board where I could actually feel the cues changing. I found that I wanted that from an experience of switching cameras. And when I could find places where I knew I was in a wide shot, but I could get closer as someone was crossing and I could fade it into there, it was a much different experience than was a TV film experience. And it wasn't theater. It was something new, but it reminded me much more of lighting than it did of TV.
Your inner director really wanted out.
But it was definitely I find that as my theater company that I work with, we're a developmental theater company. We grow everybody. We grow actors, we grow writers, we grow everyone. So our crew are fresh out of school. Our cast is anybody who wants to do theater, we're your people. And we can get away with that because we have the collective experience of kind of the old people who've been doing it for a long time. And what's been really interesting with stage managers is that they're very, very good at managing things, but they're not great at calling cues. And what we realized is that I learned probably the timing and pacing through being a light board operator and through feeling the light change, that I can sit in a theater now and I know where the cues go. Like I can feel it. And that was something that even when I was coming up in the world in Los Angeles, at one point I had 10 shows running because people knew I could call a show I had never seen before. So they'd call me. They're like, my stage manager just drove off the 405. Can you come? We'll pay you a lot of money. I was like, sure. And I always had my assistants who could go in and do whatever. But I find that it's very difficult to teach that. And I think one of the reasons is that with everything as a go button with QLab and with all of the new technology that we use even in theater, it's much harder to feel how technology feels. And it's very hard to explain how technology feels if you don't come from that background.
Like if you don't come from the 2-scene preset where you're doing the slider bar.
Where when you touch the light, you are physically making it happen.
Do you remember when you used to have to take a pencil into the cassette tape to wind it? Everybody, those of you that know this motion is lost on you, I'm sure. Do you? But anyway,
listen, back I had a show where every single cassette ate from the beginning of the show, and by the end I had no cues.
Yeah. It was like a self-destructing show. It was Bex, did you have something else you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I thought of another piece of tech that I guess it's still tech, but like universal lighting, because I cut my professional teeth on outdoor touring Shakespeare, and that being someone who grew up in like the digital age, not being in like a theater where the lights are out and you can't see the audience and the actors are here and the audience is here, but being running right through the aisles and like clambering over people and being able to see the middle school boys running their bicycles and then make a U-turn and come sit down and watch the show. I mean, that that tag of just having the lights, and then we had 2 light trees in the back when the sun went down. Being able to see the audience and just further that connection, I feel like brought everyone into the story and like really cemented the like how I went into college and how I focused on telling stories, with the audience rather than to the audience.
I'm so going to steal that phrase. With
Yeah.
the audience, not to the audience. I love that.
Creating that audience experience. I always say that that's my job as a producer, is to manage the audience experience from the time they buy a ticket to the time that they leave. And so when I do a lot of dramaturgy work with writers, a lot of times this is where TV and theater are very, very different. Television writers are so used to a constant feedback loop and constant revision that they're much less precious about things. Whereas a theater writer, legit, they have been working on something in their apartment for 10 or 20 years before it comes to me as a producer. And then I look at it and I go, hey, this doesn't work. They're like, that comma is very important, Tamra. It's like, it is, but maybe there's room, because I have to often think when I go to a rehearsal and I'm sitting in the theater, I have to remember that someone just got off of the freeway and they've been working all day and they ran into the theater, and that first 10 minutes is them recalibrating themselves to be involved. And if we're not careful in that storytelling, then we'll leave them behind. And that's equally part of it, is a community effort to give someone an experience that allows them to leave everything they came into the theater with and be somewhere else, which is very different, because you can't even go to the movies without them literally telling you before the movie has started, hey, did you go out and get something to eat? They do not prepare you to get into the movie experience. They prepare you to go purchase more things. Whereas with theater, we have to be really careful in those first 10 minutes to make sure that we are inviting an audience in, because we're controlling their experience and allowing them the freedom to, to choose what they want to see. But they can't do that just having run in the door.
Well, and see, that's where I'm learning that people do not understand communication, and they want to put a paragraph on the side of a bus,
right?
Thinking people are going to see it or read it. It's like, you got one word and 3 seconds, and so consequently, context of what is your message, what's your audience, who's your audience, and what do you want them to do is, you say, the producer's responsibility. So that's where I'm loving that each of these new venues have a value of themselves. Stop trying to make them what they're not. Oh, it's not, the book is not as good as the movie's not as good as the book. It never will be. You don't have 12 hours. Your butt won't take it. That's why 90 minutes is a film. That's all the longer you can hold your bladder.
There was a 12-hour production in Chicago.
By
the Hypocrites did.
Well, and what was
Greek drama in 12 hours. They took I think it was All Our Tragic was the name of it. And then, but they had dinner breaks with like hummus and stuff.
There you go. And
but it was an all day show. So it's doable. I mean, that's how the Greeks did it too. Right?
And I've heard cricket can last days. So I still, there's things that are, I'll have to learn.
It's hard though, because I've done 2 shows here in Los Angeles in this developmental space. In the last like since we come back from COVID, I've done a bunch of them. We were one of the first back in New York, and we've been using this developmental space, and sitting in the back of the theater watching this audience, some of the audience that I've seen over the years, I know a lot of these patrons, they're a different audience. We are not a sit in, and when anybody tells me, but they did it on Hamilton, or but so-and-so did it, or the audience can sit through this, I'm like, you do not know who you are performing in front of, because I've had great shows that I've had to cut down, not because they were not good storytelling, but because the audience was going to leave, or they were going to just not have the experience that you wanted them to have. And it was better to cut scenes down, good scenes, and put them in somewhere else in order to make sure that the audience was having an experience. And it's a tough conversation to have with writers, to say, look, you wrote a great scene. It doesn't fit right now. These people don't have stamina as an audience that we had 3 years ago. Will we get it back? Yeah, but we don't have it right now.
Mm-hmm. I think we're gonna wrap up here in a second, but because I'm the host, I'm gonna have the last word. No, I'm joking. I'll let everybody else say something. One of the things it's interesting thinking about this audience is the acclimatization methods for audiences that I've been reading about it with immersive, and you see it happening in for example, theme parks do this really well. Like a theme park, like if you go to Florida, why would you? But if you go to Florida and you go, sorry, Florida. But if you go to Florida and you go to Universal Studios or something like that, and they, like when you're going on a ride, you enter into like the pre-loading area, but they start to like warm you up for the ride, and they entertain you on the way to the ride, because you're going to wait for a long time. You go on the ride for a hot second, and then you get a little bit of that on the way out too, right? But they tell the story while you're waiting. They set you up for the experience. You have the experience. They give you a little like breather on the way out of the experience, etc. And a lot of some immersive theater productions do that too, to kind of like they have to set up the rules of engagement for the show, right? Like don't touch actors or do touch actor, or there's like rules that happen, turn off your phones, etc. But they also start to like get you ready for the experience in a way that I'm like, maybe we need to think about doing that a little bit more for audiences now seeing theater in a way that like maybe we didn't have to before. But also the more that we want to bring in new theater, new and younger theater audiences, like we might need to share some not rules of engagement, but like do a little bit of educating. But also there's a lot of gatekeeping in theater of yore that like can go away, like this. So like, don't talk back or don't respond, like you shouldn't laugh too much, or you're not laughing. And like there's like, I feel like there's a lot of people that gatekeep in a way for that like, shut up, who cares, right, anymore. But I don't know, but maybe it's like, are we giving audiences what they need to fully enjoy the performance? I'm not sure if we're doing that. I don't know.
No, I would agree with that.
And maybe that's something that could be for the next time. They can talk about that. But does anyone else have last words, hot things they want to say before I
want us to own that we are entertainers. And that's our job. If we mess up on stage, we are insulting those that have paid money to be entertained. Now, if it's a stand-up comedy and heckling is a part of your act, work it hard, but own it. So I think that each of us are owning where we belong, what we are supposed to be doing in this, in our calling of being a part of a community. Maybe we're the jesters, maybe we're the fools, but everybody is a part of the tribe in some way. So I'm grateful for this connection that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So good to see you all. Good to meet you all.
Yes, thank you so much. It was so nice to talk to everyone here, and please thank our excellent panelists. Thank you to Kyle Hammond for creating and producing this show. Thank you to officehours.global, Edwin Ruiz, and the Mondo Machine. Thank You 5 is made possible by Straw Dog Theater Company ensemble members. And so Straw Dog Theater is run on a free theater model where our productions are available to anyone and everyone. And we can only do this with generous donations from our community. So you can find out information about donating or becoming a Straw Dog member and helping to continuously support our work. We'll see you next week for a conversation with more theater artists. So please submit your questions. If anything triggered something interesting or you want to explore more, then ask a question about it so the next panel can take it on. If you want to join or have a friend, look at the strawdog.org Thank You 5 page and send them our way. And thank you so much for watching. And thank you, panelists, for having this great conversation. It was so nice to meet everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know.